The great hall on planet Varan Prime was full of noise and fear. Beings from many different worlds sat in their seats talking loudly. Their faces showed worry. Some were shaking. Others were crying. The holographic screens around the room showed the same terrible sight again and again. Ships. Thousands of enemy ships moving through space like a dark cloud. These ships belonged to the Vexmore Empire. Everyone in the galaxy knew that name. Everyone feared it. The Vexmore had destroyed 17 star systems already. They took planets and made them their own. They took people and made them slaves. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever tried. Ambassador Hyun stood near the back of the room. She was human from Earth. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking just a little. Earth had joined the Galactic Council only 5 years ago. The humans were new here. The other species looked at them like children. Interesting children, but still children who did not understand how the galaxy really worked. High Chancellor Vexthar stood at the center of the room. He was tall, made of living crystal that caught the light and threw colors everywhere. He was old, very old. His species had been traveling the stars when humans still lived in caves. He raised one crystal hand and the room became quiet. His voice was like bells ringing. Clear and cold. He spoke words that made the fear in the room grow larger. The Vexmore were coming to their worlds. They would arrive in less than 1 month. The Council had studied all the options. They had run computer simulations. They had asked their smartest minds. The answer was always the same. They could not win if they fought. The only choice was to run, to scatter across the galaxy and hide. Maybe in 1,000 years they could come back. Maybe the Vexmore would be gone by then. Ambassador Hyun felt something hot rise in her chest. She could not stay quiet. She stood up. Her voice was not as loud as the others, but it was strong. She said they should not run. She said they should fight together. All the species, all their ships, all their weapons. If they worked as one, maybe they could stop the Vexmore. Maybe they could protect their homes. The room became silent for a moment. Then someone laughed. It was a harsh sound. Then another species representative laughed. Then more. Soon the whole room was laughing at her. Not happy laughter. Bitter laughter. The kind that said she did not understand. One by one, they told her why fighting was stupid. The Vexmore had 10 ships for every one of theirs. The Vexmore had weapons that could destroy planets. The Vexmore had been conquering worlds for centuries and never lost a war. Fighting them was the same as dying. Running meant at least some of them would survive. Ambassador Hyun tried to speak again, but High Chancellor Vexthar cut her off. He said the vote would happen now. Every species would choose. Stay and die or leave and live. One by one, every species voted to leave. Every single one. Except Earth. The humans voted to stay. The Chancellor looked at her with what might have been pity in his crystal eyes. He said the evacuation ships would leave in 48 hours. Earth had that long to change its mind and join them. Then he dismissed the council. Everyone started to leave, talking about where they would go, what they would take, how long they would hide. No one looked at Ambassador Hyun as they left. She stood alone in the empty hall, looking at the screens that still showed the approaching enemy fleet. She took a deep breath. Then she activated her communication device and called home. Back on Earth, in the city of Seoul, Fleet Admiral Doyen sat in the command center deep underground. He was an older man with gray hair and hard eyes that had seen war before. When Ambassador Hyun's message came through, he listened without speaking. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Around him sat the other military leaders. General Minho was there, a strong man who commanded all the ground soldiers. Commander Unji was there too, a woman with sharp eyes who led the space fleet. Dr. Ji-won sat in the corner, a scientist who made weapons. They all heard the message. They all understood what it meant. They could run with the others. They could pack up and leave Earth behind. Find some empty corner of space and hide there until they died of old age or the Vexmore found them. Or they could stay. They could fight. They would probably die. Almost certainly die. But they would die on their home world, fighting for something that mattered. The debate did not last long. General Minho spoke first. He said humans had always fought when they had to. Every nation on Earth had faced terrible enemies before. Many times they had been outnumbered. Many times they should have lost. But they fought anyway. Sometimes they won. Sometimes they lost. But they always fought, Commander Yunji agreed. She said running meant giving up everything. Their planet, their history, their pride. She would rather die fighting than live as a coward, even if no one remembered them. Even if they lost so badly that nothing remained. At least they would know they tried. Dr. Jiwon had been quiet, but now she spoke. She said her team had been working on new weapons. Strange weapons, dangerous weapons. Weapons that other species would never use because they were too risky or too unpredictable. But humans were creative. Humans thought differently. Maybe that would be enough. Probably not. But maybe. Fleet Admiral Doyen listened to them all. Then he made his decision. He sent out the order. Earth would not evacuate. Earth would fight. Every person who could hold a weapon would be trained. Every ship would be armed. Every defense would be built. They had 1 month. 1 month to prepare for an enemy that had never been defeated. The next days were like nothing Earth had ever seen. Everywhere, people worked. The asteroid miners stripped rocks for metal. The factories ran day and night, making weapons, ships, bullets, bombs. The moon became covered with gun platforms. Every satellite was turned into either a weapon or a sensor. Dr. Jiwon's teams built their experimental weapons. They made missiles that flew at speeds close to light itself. They made lasers powered by nuclear explosions. They made swarms of tiny drones that could think together like a hive mind. They made bombs that worked in strange ways that exploded when they should not. That confused enemy computers. Young pilots trained in simulators. One of them was Captain Seojun. He was only 25 years old. He had never been in a real battle. None of them had. Earth had been at peace for 30 years. But peace was over now. He trained 12 hours a day, learning how to fly, how to shoot, how to survive. Knowing that survive probably meant lasting a few minutes longer than the others. The 48 hours passed. The Galactic Council ships left. Most of them. A few alien ships stayed at the edge of the solar system. They wanted to watch. They wanted to see how long Earth would last. Some of them felt bad about leaving. Some of them thought the humans were brave fools. All of them thought the humans would be dead within a week. Then, on the 3rd day after the deadline, the sensors picked up something. Something huge. Something terrible. The Vexmore had arrived. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Each ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, silent, confident. They had done this many times before. In the command center, Fleet Admiral Doyen watched the screens. He saw those 300 ships. He knew what they could do. He knew that Earth's entire fleet had maybe 100 ships, and they were smaller, weaker, older. But he did not feel fear. Or maybe he felt fear, but something stronger too. Determination, anger, pride. He gave the first order. Not to surrender. Not to negotiate. The order was simple: fight. Make them pay for every meter of space. Make them remember Earth. Make them wish they had never come. The war for humanity's survival had begun. The Vexmore warships moved through space like sharks through water, smooth, deadly, sure of themselves. On the lead ship, Warlord Krath sat on his command throne. He was massive, with 4 arms and skin like dark metal. His eyes glowed red. He had conquered 43 worlds in his long life. This would be number 44. He looked at the data about Earth, a young species. Barely into space. Their weapons were simple: missiles, bullets, nuclear bombs. Nothing special. Nothing dangerous. The report said this conquest would take 6 hours. Krath thought that was too long. He expected most of the humans to surrender after seeing his fleet. They always did. He sent the standard message. Surrender now or be destroyed. 1 hour to decide. The message went out in every human language. It played on every screen on Earth. It was clear. It was final. Submit or die. Fleet Admiral Doyen received the message in the command center. He read it once. Then he deleted it. He did not bother to reply with words. Instead, he gave an order to activate the first defense. All around the solar system, thousands of small satellites suddenly turned on. They had been floating dark and quiet. Now they lit up. Each one broadcast signals that made it look like a ship. Not just one ship. Each satellite pretended to be 10 ships. Suddenly, the Vexmore sensors showed not 100 human ships, but thousands. The whole system seemed full of warships. On the Vexmore flagship, alarms went off. Officers shouted reports. The screen showed human ships everywhere. Impossible numbers. Warlord Krath stood up from his throne. His red eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. The data had said the humans were weak. But this many ships? Even a young species could be dangerous with enough numbers. He ordered his fleet to slow down, to scan carefully, to find the real ships among the fake ones. His officers worked fast, but it took time. Time the humans used well. While the Vexmore were confused, the real attack came. From deep in the asteroid belt, humanity launched its special weapons. Dr. Jiwan called them relativistic kill missiles. They were just chunks of metal, really. Tungstenrods. But they were moving at incredible speed, almost as fast as light itself. At that speed, even a small rock became a terrible weapon. The Vexmore sensors picked them up too late. Their defense systems tried to shoot them down. Most of the missiles were destroyed. But 3 got through. 3 pieces of metal, each weighing a few tons, hit 3 Vexmore ships. The impact was like small suns exploding. The ships did not break apart. They simply stopped existing. 1 second they were there. The next second there was only light and dust. For a moment the Vexmore fleet did not move. They had not taken casualties in an opening attack for 200 years. Warlord Krath felt something he had not felt in a long time. Not fear, not yet, but surprise. These humans were more clever than expected. He gave new orders. Advance, full speed. Weapons ready, no more caution. He would crush these humans quickly and teach them what happened to species that resisted the Vexmore Empire. The Vexmore fleet moved toward the inner solar system, toward Jupiter. That was where the human fleet was waiting. Commander Yunji stood on the bridge of her flagship. She was 40 years old with short black hair and a scar across her left cheek from an accident years ago. She watched the enemy ships approach and felt her heart beat faster. This was it. The real battle. Her fleet was small, only 100 ships, against 300 enemy warships. But she had advantages. She knew this system. She had planned every move. And Jupiter itself was a weapon if you knew how to use it. The Vexmore arrived at Jupiter and the battle began. It was not like battles in movies. There was no sound in space, no dramatic music. Just ships moving, weapons firing, explosions blooming silent and bright. Commander Yunji did not try to fight the Vexmore head-on. That would be suicide. Instead, her ships scattered. They dove into Jupiter's radiation belts where sensors did not work well. They hid behind moons. They used the planet's gravity to sling themselves into attack positions. Captain Seojin flew his fighter in patterns that made no sense to military computers. He would fly straight at enemy ships, then veer away at the last second. He would expose his ship to draw fire, then dodge into the radiation storms where the enemy could not track him. His squadron followed his lead. They flew like insects, unpredictable and annoying. The Vexmore had better ships, better weapons, better shields, but they fought by the rules. They stayed in formation. They followed tactical doctrine. They did what computers calculated was the best strategy. The humans did not care about strategy. They cared about making the enemy bleed. When human ships ran out of missiles, they used their guns. When they ran out of bullets, they rammed. One pilot, her fighter crippled and drifting, aimed her ship at a Vexmore cruiser and set her reactor to overload. The explosion took out the cruiser and 2 smaller ships nearby. She died, but she took 30 enemy crew with her. This happened again and again. Humans refused to surrender, refused to run. When their ships were dying, they became weapons. Captain Seojin watched half his squadron die in the first hour. Friends he had trained with, people he had eaten meals with, gone. But they took Vexmore ships with them, every single one. On the Vexmore flagship, Warlord Krath watched the battle with growing anger. His ships were winning. They were destroying human vessels at a rate of 3 to 1, but they were taking damage. Real damage. By all logic, the humans should have retreated already, should have begged for mercy. But they kept fighting. Then something strange happened. The humans started broadcasting sounds, music, songs from their home world. Loud, aggressive music. Music about fighting. About refusing to give up. About death and glory. It played on every frequency. You could not shut it off. One human pilot, his ship torn apart and systems failing, used his last power to send a message. His voice was young, maybe 20 years old. He said, "You will have to kill every single one of us, and we will make you pay for each one." Then his ship exploded, taking 2 Vexmore fighters with it. Warlord Krath had fought for 3 centuries. He had seen brave species before, seen desperate last stands, but never like this. These humans fought like they had no fear, like death meant nothing. It was disturbing, wrong, against all psychological models. The battle lasted 6 hours. In the end, the Vexmore won. They had more ships, more firepower. The human fleet was forced to retreat. Commander Yunji gave the order with tears on her face. They had lost 70 ships, most of her fleet. But the Vexmore had lost 25 warships, 25 against a primitive species. It should not have been possible. As the human ships retreated toward Mars, they left behind gifts. Strange devices that Dr. Jiwan's team had made. They did not explode. They just caused chaos. They sent out random signals. They created false readings. They made the space around Jupiter impossible to scan properly. The Vexmore would have to clear every single device before they could advance safely. It took them 2 full days. 2 days where they sat in the Jupiter system, clearing mines, checking for traps, trying to understand what the humans would do next. 2 days the humans used to prepare their next defense at Mars. On his flagship, Warlord Krath updated his conquest estimate. 6 hours had been wrong. Very wrong. He now calculated that taking the Earth system would require 2 weeks, maybe more. His superiors would be angry. They would demand explanations. But Krath did not care about their anger. He cared about the strange, stubborn species that refused to understand they were beaten. At the edge of the solar system, the alien observer ships watched everything. They recorded the battle. They could not believe what they were seeing. The humans should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, they had fought for hours. They had inflicted real damage on the mighty Vexmore fleet. One observer, a being from the Keltheran species, sent a message back to his people in hiding. The message was short. It said, "The humans are still fighting, against all logic, against all odds. They are still fighting." And in that message was something the Keltherans had not felt in a very long time. Something dangerous, something the Vexmore should have feared more than any weapon. It was hope. Mars had become a fortress. Every dome, every tunnel, every surface installation was now armed. Giant guns pointed at the sky. Underground bunkers held supplies for months. Soldiers trained in the red dust, preparing for an enemy they knew they could not defeat. General Minho walked through the main military base looking at his troops. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a face that rarely smiled. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He had seen combat before, back when nations on Earth still fought each other. But this was different. This was not a war between humans. This was survival of the species. His troops were a mix of professional soldiers and volunteers, teachers who had learned to shoot, engineers who now set traps, doctors who trained with rifles in the morning and saved lives in the afternoon. All of them knew what was coming. All of them stayed anyway. Colonel Jamin was one of General Minho's best officers. He was younger, maybe 40, with quick eyes and faster hands. He specialized in guerrilla warfare, fighting dirty, fighting smart. He knew that in a straight battle the Vexmore would win, so he did not plan to fight straight. He planned to make every street, every tunnel, every building a nightmare for the invaders. Above Mars, Commander Yunji prepared her remaining ships. 47 vessels. That was all that was left of Earth's fleet. Not enough to stop the Vexmore, not even close, but enough to make them bleed a little more, enough to buy time for the ground forces to prepare. Then the Vexmore arrived. Every sensor lit up. Every alarm screamed. 300 warships, though fewer than before, appeared in orbit around Mars. They looked damaged, scarred. The Battle of Jupiter had hurt them. But they were still overwhelming. Still deadly. Warlord Krath was done being careful. Done being patient. This time he committed everything. Every ship. Every weapon. He would crush the human fleet in one blow, then rain fire on the planet until nothing moved. The space battle was short and brutal. Commander Yunji knew she could not win. Winning was not the goal. The goal was to last as long as possible, to destroy as many enemy ships as possible, to make the Vexmore remember this day. Her ships fought in clusters, protecting each other, focusing fire on single targets. They took down Vexmore ships one at a time. But for every enemy ship destroyed, 3 human ships died. The math was simple and terrible. Captain Seojin was there, flying his damaged fighter. Half of his systems did not work. His shields were barely functional, but his weapons still fired. He stayed in the battle, attacking, dodging, watching his friends die around him. Each time a ship exploded, he felt something inside him break. But he kept flying, kept fighting, because that was all he could do. Commander Unji's flagship was the last human ship still fighting. All the others were gone, destroyed or crippled. She stood on her bridge, blood running from a cut on her forehead, and gave one final order. Full speed, ramming course. Target the biggest enemy ship. Her crew did not hesitate. They knew what it meant. They set the course. The ship accelerated, engines screaming. Commander Unji sent a final message to the ground forces. 3 words. Make them bleed. Then her ship hit a Vexmore battlecruiser at full speed. The explosion was massive. Both ships broke apart. Debris rained down on Mars, burning through the thin atmosphere, leaving trails of fire across the red sky. Commander Unji died, but she took 800 Vexmore crew with her. It was the best death she could have asked for. With space secured, the Vexmore began landing troops. Thousands of them. But these were not Vexmore soldiers. The Vexmore did not risk their own people in ground combat. Instead, they used shock troops. Slaves taken from conquered worlds, cybernetically enhanced, their brains altered to make them obedient. They felt no fear. They did not question orders. They just attacked. General Minho watched them land through his binoculars. He felt a mixture of pity and anger. These beings had been people once. Now they were weapons, tools used by the Vexmore. He ordered his forces to engage. The shock troops expected the humans to break quickly. Most species did. Fear was a powerful weapon, but the humans did not break. They fought from prepared positions. They used every advantage the terrain gave them. Colonel Jamin led the defense of the main colony dome. He had positioned snipers on high points, set traps in the streets, rigged buildings to collapse. When the shock troops advanced, they walked into a killing zone. Humans fired from windows, from rooftops, from underground tunnels. The shock troops fell by the dozens, but they kept coming. That was what they were made for, to absorb casualties, to overwhelm through numbers. The human lines began to bend. Colonel Jamin pulled his forces back, fighting from building to building, collapsing tunnels behind them, leaving nothing useful for the enemy. Sergeant Hiejin was a combat engineer. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, but she was brilliant at destruction. Her job was to make the Vexmore victory as expensive as possible. She booby-trapped everything. Water supplies were poisoned. Equipment left behind was rigged to explode. Even corpses were turned into traps. The Vexmore shock troops began to show strain. They were conditioned not to feel fear. But conditioning had limits. They were programmed to fight enemies that eventually broke. The humans did not break. Positions that should have been abandoned were defended to the last person. Soldiers who should have surrendered fought until they ran out of bullets, then fought with knives, then fought with their bare hands. 3 weeks passed. The Vexmore controlled most of Mars's surface, but the humans still fought from the underground tunnel networks. Every day brought more casualties for both sides. Every day made Warlord Krath angrier. Then something unexpected happened. A group of shock troops approached a human position and did not attack. They held up their hands. They were surrendering, but not in defeat. In defection, there were 60 of them. They were Keltherans, from one of the species that had fled with the Galactic Council. They had been captured decades ago, turned into shock troops, their memories suppressed, their will broken. But watching humans fight had changed something, awakened something they thought was dead forever. Colonel Jamin met with their leader through a translator. The Keltheran had once been called Kelthros. Now he was just a number in the Vexmore system. But talking to humans, he remembered his name. Remembered what it felt like to choose. Kelthros spoke in broken words. His voice was rough from decades of not speaking except to confirm orders. He said, "You fight like you have no fear of death." We forgot that was possible. We forgot we could choose to resist. Tears ran down his face. Tears he had not cried in 30 years. Colonel Jamin did not know what to say. He had been fighting for survival. He did not think about inspiring anyone. But here were these beings, broken and rebuilt as weapons, finding their will to resist again. He offered them a choice. Hide and be safe or fight alongside humans. All 60 chose to fight. They knew the Vexmore cybernetics in their bodies. They knew weaknesses in the enemy systems. They began to sabotage, to spread doubt, to whisper to other shock troops that resistance was possible. On his flagship, Warlord Krath received reports of defections spreading. Small groups at first, then larger ones. Shock troops refusing orders, equipment failing mysteriously. It was like a disease spreading through his forces, and at the center of it somehow were the humans, not through weapons or technology, but through their simple refusal to accept defeat. Krath had had enough. Mars should have fallen in days. It had been 3 weeks. His forces controlled the surface, but the humans would not surrender. Worse, their resistance was inspiring his own troops to rebel. This could not continue. He would end it now, even if it meant destroying everything. He gave the order to activate the planet killer weapon. It was expensive. It was wasteful. But it was necessary. The weapon began to charge. In 12 hours it would be ready. Then Mars would be reduced to radioactive dust. Every human on it would die. The rebellion would end. Deep underground, human sensors detected the weapon charging. Fleet Admiral Doyen, coordinating the defense from Earth, saw the readings. He knew what it meant. Mars had 12 hours left. 12 hours to do something impossible. 12 hours to save a planet that was already dead. But 12 hours was still time, and humans were very good at making impossible plans. The underground command center on Mars was quiet except for the soft beeping of computers. General Minho, Colonel Jamin, and the other officers stood around a table covered with maps and data screens. They all knew they had 12 hours before the planet killer weapon fired. 12 hours to live or to do something about it. The communication screen flickered. Fleet Admiral Doyen appeared, speaking from Earth. His face looked older than it had a month ago. The war had aged him years and weeks. Behind him stood Dr. Jiwan. She was holding a data pad and her hands were shaking. Dr. Jiwan explained her plan. Her team had built a weapon. A strange weapon based on quantum physics that most people did not understand. It could open a tiny hole in space, a wormhole. For just a fraction of a second, it could put something from one place into another place, through shields, through armor, right inside an enemy ship. The weapon had never been tested. The computer simulation said it had a 30% chance of working, 70% chance of failing completely, maybe exploding, maybe opening a wormhole that would not close, maybe doing nothing at all. But if it worked, they could put 100 nuclear warheads inside the Vexmore flagship, inside its reactor core. The explosion would destroy the ship instantly. There was one problem. A big problem. The weapon had to be delivered by hand. Someone had to fly it close to the enemy flagship. Very close. Close enough to be shot down easily. Close enough to be killed by the explosion even if it worked. It was a suicide mission. A guarantee of death. Captain Seojin volunteered immediately. So did 50 other pilots. Every single one left alive. Fleet Admiral Doyen looked at them all. He felt pride and grief at the same time. These young people ready to die for a slim chance to save Mars. He chose Seojin, not because he wanted Seojin to die, but because Seojin was the best pilot. The best chance of success, but one ship alone would never make it through. The Vexmore would shoot it down before it got close. They needed a distraction. Something big. Something that would force Warlord Krath to focus all his attention elsewhere. Colonel Jamin knew what had to be done. Every soldier on Mars would attack. All of them. At the same time, a final desperate assault on the Vexmore positions. It would be hopeless. They would be slaughtered. But it would create chaos. It would force the Vexmore to commit their orbital ships to support their ground forces. And in that chaos, one small fighter might slip through. General Minho gave the orders. Every able-bodied person was to prepare for combat. They would attack at dawn, the artificial dawn inside the domes. They would pour out of the tunnels and hit the Vexmore with everything they had left. It would be beautiful and terrible, and probably their last act as a species. Before the battle, Colonel Jamin recorded a message. He knew the Vexmore would intercept it. That was the point. The message was not for Warlord Krath or his officers. It was for the shock troops, the enslaved beings forced to fight for the Empire. The message was simple. It said that the shock troops had seen humans fight. They had seen what resistance looked like. Their masters wanted them to think they were broken, that their will was gone forever. But humans prove that will never truly dies. When the humans fell today, the shock troops should remember that someone stood up. And when their own chance came, they should stand too. Dawn came. The human forces poured out of their tunnels like an angry tide. Thousands of them. Many were wounded. Many were exhausted. All of them were scared. But fear did not stop them. They ran toward the Vexmore positions, firing, screaming, refusing to accept their fate quietly. The Vexmore shock troops were caught by surprise. Not by the attack itself, but by its ferocity. These humans should have been broken, should have been too tired to fight. But they came like a wave, overwhelming forward positions through pure determination. Sergeant Heejin led a team that captured a Vexmore communications node. They held it for 7 minutes before being overrun. In those 7 minutes, she broadcast Colonel Jamin's message on every Vexmore frequency. Every shock trooper heard it. Every enslaved being heard those words about resistance and hope. Warlord Krath watched the human attack from his flagship. He could not understand it. These beings had no chance. They were attacking positions that were impossible to take. It was madness. But it was working. His ground forces were being pushed back. He had to commit his orbital ships to support them. Had to bring his warships down into the atmosphere to provide fire support. While Mars burned, Captain Seojin launched from Earth's moon. His fighter was small and stripped down, carrying nothing but the quantum weapon and enough fuel for one trip. 20 other pilots flew with him, not to help deliver the weapon. They could not. But because no one should die alone, they flew through the asteroid belt using the rocks for cover. They burned their engines as hard as possible, racing toward Mars, toward the Vexmore fleet, toward death. Seojin thought about his family on Earth, about the friends he had lost at Jupiter, about Commander Unji's last words. Make them bleed. The Vexmore detected them when they cleared the asteroid belt. Enemy fighters swarmed toward them. Seojin's wingmen engaged, buying him time, buying him seconds. One by one they died. His friend Taehyung went first, his ship torn apart by enemy fire. Then Min Seo, then Ji Yeon, then others whose names he would never forget. Each one, before they died, sent the same message. Go, finish it. Keep flying. Make it count. Their deaths were not in vain if Seojin succeeded. That was all they wanted. To matter. To mean something. Seojin's fighter took a hit. His shields collapsed. Alarms screamed. His engines were damaged. He was losing power. But he was close, so close. The Vexmore flagship filled his entire view screen. Massive, powerful. Its planet-killer weapon glowing bright as it prepared to fire on Mars. His hands moved over the controls. He activated Dr. Jiwon's weapon. The quantum calculations began running. Numbers flashed on his screen too fast to read. The weapon hummed, building power. Seojin thought about all the people depending on him. Everyone on Mars, everyone on Earth, the entire human species. It all came down to this moment. This one impossible shot, the weapon fired. For a moment, nothing happened. Seojin thought it had failed. But then space itself seemed to twist. A tiny hole appeared, so small it was barely visible. It lasted less than a second. But a second was enough. 100 nuclear warheads appeared inside the Vexmore flagship, right in the reactor core, right in the heart of the ship. There was no time for anyone to react. No time for alarms, no time for fear. The explosion was like a new sun being born. The flagship simply ceased to exist. Vaporized. Gone. 3,000 Vexmore died in an instant, including Warlord Krath. The shockwave destroyed 2 nearby cruisers. Debris rained down on Mars like meteors. On Mars, Colonel Jamin saw the explosion light up the sky. He knew what it meant. He grabbed his radio and screamed at his troops. Press the attack. Give them no time to recover. Hit them now while they are confused. The Vexmore fleet fell into chaos. Their leader was dead. Their command structure was gone. Ships received no orders. Some tried to retreat. Some tried to attack. Some just drifted, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. And in that moment of confusion, something remarkable happened. Kelthros broadcast the message again. Colonel Jamin's message about resistance. But this time from a Vexmore military channel. Other shock troops heard it. Some remembered who they had been before enslavement. Some remembered that they could choose. The uprising began small. A few shock troops refusing orders, a technical crew sabotaging weapons, but it spread fast. Within hours, 20% of the invasion force was in rebellion. Shock troops turned on their Vexmore overseers. Ships were taken over by their own crews. The perfect military machine began to tear itself apart. The battle for Mars continued for 3 more days. Brutal days, bloody days. 50,000 more humans died. But they held. They survived. And when the Vexmore finally retreated, they left behind a quarter of their fleet. dead or captured. It was the first time in their long history that the Vexmore had been defeated. In space, rescue crews found Captain Seogen's fighter. It was damaged but intact. He was unconscious, badly wounded, but alive. Against all odds, against all probability, he had survived. They brought him back to Earth, to hospitals, to people who wept with joy to see him breathing. The war was not over. But humanity had done the impossible. They had stood. They had fought. And somehow, impossibly, they had won. 3 months after the battle, the first Galactic Council ships returned to Earth's solar system. They came slowly, carefully, as if approaching something dangerous. Their sensors had told them something impossible. Earth still existed. Mars still existed. Humans were still alive. The observer ships that had watched from a distance sent reports that the Council members could not believe. Not only had Earth survived, but the Vexmore Empire was collapsing. The rebellion that started on Mars had spread. Conquered species across dozens of star systems were rising up. The unstoppable empire was being torn apart from inside. High Chancellor Vexthar came to Earth personally. His crystal body seemed dimmer than before, as if shame had dulled his light. Ambassador Hyun, now promoted to Secretary General of the Terran Federation, met him in the rebuilt command center. The building still had scorch marks on the walls from the war. The Chancellor spoke words that did not come easily to a being as ancient and proud as him. He apologized. He said the Council had calculated everything wrong. They had run simulations, used their best computers, asked their smartest minds. Every calculation said that resistance meant death. So they chose to run. They chose survival over honor, but they never calculated that the illogical choice might be the right one. They never considered that sometimes you fight not because you can win, but because it is right, because some things are worth dying for. The humans had taught them that lesson at a terrible price. Ambassador Hyun listened quietly. When the Chancellor finished, she nodded. She said Earth would accept the apology, but things had to change. The Galactic Council could not just go back to how it was before. They had to learn from what happened. They had to remember that courage matters more than calculation sometimes. The Council offered Earth many things: a seat of honor in the government, access to advanced technology, help rebuilding what the war had destroyed. Fleet Admiral Doyen attended the ceremony. He had retired from active duty after losing his left arm in the final battles on Mars, but he was still respected, still honored, still a symbol of humanity's determination. Captain Seogen was there too, walking with a cane. His wounds had been severe. Doctors said he would never fully recover. But he was alive. That was more than most of his squadron could say. He wore his uniform with pride, medals covering his chest, each one representing a friend who did not come home. General Minho stood beside him, promoted from Colonel Jamin. He had led the ground forces on Mars and survived against impossible odds. Dr. Jiwon was there as well, now head of a joint research program between humans and aliens. She had won the Council's highest scientific honor for her quantum weapon. In her acceptance speech, she had honored Commander Yoonji and all the pilots who died testing humanity's experimental technology. Kelthros attended too, representing the newly liberated Keltheran worlds. He stood tall now, no longer a slave. His cybernetic implants had been removed or reprogrammed. He could think clearly again, feel emotions again. He and General Minho had become friends, bonding over shared experiences of war and loss. But Ambassador Hyun did not just accept the Council's gifts. She made her own proposal. The Council needed to change how it thought, how it acted. It needed to stop calculating everything in terms of probability and logic. Sometimes the right choice was the one that looked impossible. She proposed creating a new military force. The Galactic Defense Fleet. It would be trained by humans in Earth style of warfare, not to conquer, not to expand territory, but to ensure that no species ever again faced extinction alone, that there would always be someone willing to stand with them. The Council debated for days. Some thought it was too dangerous, that teaching others to fight like humans would create chaos, but others remembered watching Earth's battle, remembered feeling ashamed that they had run. In the end, they voted yes. General Minho was chosen to lead the new fleet. On Mars, they built a monument in the ruins where the first battles had been fought. It was made of red Martian stone carved with names. Over 200,000 names. Every human who had died in the war. Soldiers and civilians. young and old. Each name was important. Each person had mattered. At the top of the monument were words carved in every human language and translated into the languages of every council species. The words said, "Here we stood. Here we bled. Here we proved that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to fight despite it." All species ran from the invasion. Only humans took a stand. And in standing, we showed the galaxy that freedom is worth any price. Below that, Kelthros and other liberated beings added their own words. "Thank you for reminding us who we used to be. Thank you for showing us who we could become again." Life slowly returned to normal, though normal meant something different now. Fleet Admiral Doyen taught at the new military academy, training officers from dozens of species. His lectures on creative warfare became famous across the galaxy. He taught that superior technology did not matter as much as superior determination. Captain Seojun never returned to active combat duty. His injuries were too severe, but he became a test pilot for Dr. Jiwon's new projects. She was developing faster ships, better engines, technology that would let humanity explore parts of space that had been unreachable before. Sojun said that if he could not fight anymore, at least he could help others see new worlds. Sergeant Hyojin left the military entirely. She became a sculptor. Her most famous work was called The Last Stand. It showed a human soldier helping a fallen alien stand up again. It symbolized what humanity had done, not just fighting for themselves, but inspiring the whole galaxy to resist tyranny. General Minho spent his time traveling between worlds, training the new Galactic Defense Fleet. He was strict, but fair. He taught alien soldiers that weapons and ships were just tools. The real weapon was the will to fight, the determination to stand when everything said to run. He became respected throughout the galaxy, though he always said he was just teaching what other humans had shown him. 10 years after the invasion, Ambassador Hyun stood in the new council chambers. The room had changed. 30 newly liberated species now held seats. The Vexmore Empire was gone. Its former territories were divided among the free peoples who had overthrown it. The galaxy was different now, better, more hopeful. A young Keltheran diplomat approached her one day. He had been born after the liberation. He had never been a slave. He asked her a question. He wanted to know how humans had known to resist when everyone else ran. How had they known it would work? Ambassador Hyun smiled. She told him the truth. They had not known. They had been terrified. Many humans had wanted to run too. They had no guarantee it would work. No promise of victory. But somewhere deep in human history, in their cultures and stories, they had learned something important. Some things are worth dying for. And if you are going to die anyway, you might as well die fighting for something that matters. She explained that humans had learned another truth too. One person standing up can inspire others to stand. Resistance is contagious, even hopeless resistance. Fear makes people run, but courage spreads like fire. One spark can light a galaxy. The young diplomat thought about this. Then he said something wise. He said that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their tactics. It was hope. The refusal to let hope die. Ambassador Hyun corrected him gently. She said hope was just the spark. The real weapon was the refusal to let that spark go out. Even when darkness seemed infinite, humans kept the flame burning. And eventually others saw that light and remembered they could burn too. She looked out the window at the stars. Ships from 100 worlds moved through space, trading, exploring, living free, all because one species had been stubborn enough to stand when everyone else ran, foolish enough to fight when logic said to surrender, human enough to believe that one last stand could change everything. The young diplomat thanked her and left. Ambassador Hyun turned back to her work. There was always more to do. The galaxy was free now, but freedom needed constant protection. And if humanity had learned anything from the war, it was that you do not just fight for freedom once. You fight for it every single day. On Earth, in a park in Seoul, there was another monument, smaller than the one on Mars. It showed a simple figure of a person standing, just standing. The inscription said, "They told us to run. We chose to stand, and in standing we changed the galaxy." Children played around the monument. They did not really understand what it meant yet. They had been born after the war. They lived in a galaxy where humans were heroes, where their species was respected and honored. They did not know what it felt like to be dismissed, to be called primitive, to be expected to fail. But someday they would learn the story. They would hear about the Vexmore invasion, about the Galactic Council fleeing, about the humans who stayed, about Commander Yunji ramming her ship into the enemy, about Captain Seojin's impossible mission, about the soldiers on Mars who fought until they could not stand, about every person who chose to fight when running made more sense. And when they learned that story, they would understand something important, something their ancestors had proved with blood and sacrifice, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand, even when you are scared, even when you might lose.